My wife's affair left me homeless, and my family turned their backs on me. But now that I'm a millionaire, they want to come crawling back. I'm 42, and I've been through more than most people ever should. 10 years ago, I was a different man, married to the love of my life, Natalie, with a promising future ahead. I was working hard, but life was good. Or so I thought. Our marriage was perfect. I thought we were a team, building a life together. But everything changed one night. Natalie told me she was just going out for a few drinks with some friends. She'd said it so many times before. But that night, I found a message on her phone that shattered my entire world. It was from my own brother, Mark. I didn't want to believe it, but it was clear my wife and my brother had been seeing each other behind my back. I felt a mix of disbelief and rage, not just because of the affair, but because of the betrayal from the two people I trusted most. The pain was unbearable, and the worst part was how my family reacted when I confronted them. They sided with her. They chose her over me, over their own blood. I was the outcast, the one who was too sensitive or overreacting. To make matters worse, I was left homeless by my own family. They took everything. Our house, our savings, even my friends turned their backs. I was on my own, without a roof over my head or any support. But that wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The next few years were the hardest of my life. I was broken, homeless, and abandoned by the people who should have been there for me. I struggled to get by, living in motels, crashing on friends' couches, and picking up odd jobs just to make ends meet. I didn't know how I was going to survive, but something inside me refused to give up. I had been knocked down, but I wasn't finished yet. I used the pain as fuel. I got my hands on anything that could help me bounce back, reading books on finance, business, and self-improvement. Slowly, I built myself back up. I started a small construction business with the little money I had left, and after years of long hours, determination, and sheer grit, it began to grow. By the time I was 38, my business had expanded. I went from a guy who had lost everything to someone running a profitable construction firm. But success didn't feel as sweet as I imagined it would. I hadn't been able to forgive Natalie or my family, and even though I was wealthy now, I had no one to share it with. My old friends were gone, my brother was out of my life for good, and the last time I saw Natalie, she was living with Mark in the house I once called home. Then everything changed again. A few months ago, I received a letter from my parents. It was short, cold, and to the point, but the message was clear. We're sorry. We want to make things right. Come home. At first, I thought it was some kind of joke. They had kicked me out when I was at my lowest, yet now, when I was doing well, they wanted me back? I didn't want to believe it, but the letter was signed by both of them, and it made me wonder, what had changed? I ignored the letter for a few days, but eventually, curiosity got the best of me. I called my mother, and her voice was soft, apologetic. She told me how bad they felt about what had happened, how they regretted everything. My father was more direct. He even admitted that they had been wrong to side with Natalie and Mark. He said they didn't understand at the time, but now they saw how much I had achieved and wanted to repair things. Repair things? After all these years? I couldn't just forgive them that easily. They had abandoned me when I was at my lowest, when I needed them most. And now they wanted me to forget all of that because I had money? But the kicker came when my mother mentioned Mark. She said he had been struggling. His marriage was on the rocks, his career was falling apart, and he was begging to reconcile. And Natalie? She had been in and out of relationships, all failing, and was reaching out to me, wanting to make amends. She claimed she had changed. After everything they had done, they thought that a few apologies would be enough to heal years of betrayal. I knew I had made it. My company was flourishing, my personal life was finally stable, and I had a beautiful new partner who supported me through thick and thin. But this new development, the return of my family after everything that had happened, left me conflicted. Did I owe them a second chance? Did I owe them forgiveness? Or should I just move on and keep my distance? This was more than just family trying to come back into my life. This was a test of whether I could truly leave the past behind or if I was going to repeat the mistakes of my younger self. The drama was about to unfold. Again. But this time, things would be different. This time, I wasn't the man who would be left in the dust. I was a man who had learned how to stand up for himself, and this time, I wasn't about to let them walk back into my life just because of my success. It was time for the confrontation, and I wasn't sure who was going to walk away unscathed. I decided to face this head-on. My mother and father weren't going to walk back into my life so easily, not after everything they had done. The day they showed up at my office, hoping to pick up where we left off, I was ready. I'd let them know exactly how much damage they'd caused and how their betrayal had shaped the man I had become. They arrived at my office unannounced. My mother, who once seemed so gentle and kind, now looked almost pleading, her eyes full of remorse. My father, however, had the same stern expression he'd always had, just now with a hint of guilt. They both stood in the waiting area, waiting for me to come out and see them. I walked into the room, standing there for a moment, staring at the people who had thrown me out when I was at my lowest. My emotions were a whirlpool of anger, confusion, and disbelief. How could they just show up now after all these years? "You look different," my mother said softly, her voice full of regret. "We've been hearing about your success, and we're so proud of you." Her words should have been comforting, but they stung. Pride? How could they be proud when they had no idea what I'd been through? They never asked me what happened. They just turned their backs and left me to fend for myself. "I'm not sure you have the right to be proud of me," I said, my voice steady but cold. "Not after everything." My father shifted uncomfortably. He tried to speak, but I cut him off. "You had your chance. You abandoned me when I needed you the most. I spent years picking up the pieces of my life while you turned your backs on me." His expression hardened, but my mother looked like she wanted to break down in front of me. I wasn't sure what I felt for her anymore. I wanted to hate her for everything she did, but the truth was, I just felt empty. "We didn't know what else to do. We were scared," my father said. "Your mother was worried about you spiraling out of control. And Mark." "Mark?" I interrupted, my heart racing. "You mean the man who ruined my life? The man who had an affair with my wife and left me on the street?" The words felt like a punch in the stomach. I hadn't said them out loud in so long, but now they came pouring out, raw and unfiltered. "You sided with him, Dad. You chose him over your own son. Do you know what that felt like?" My father's face flushed with shame. "I was wrong. I see that now, but at the time, I didn't want to lose my relationship with him. He was close to your uncle, and I couldn't risk damaging that. I should have been there for you." I didn't want to hear excuses. I didn't want to hear about how they didn't know what was happening. They were the adults. They were supposed to protect me, not side with the people who betrayed me. I turned to my mother, who had tears in her eyes. "And you? You were so quick to believe everything Mark said. You knew the truth, and yet you just stood by and let him destroy me." She wiped away a tear. "I was scared too. I didn't want to lose you, but I didn't know how to deal with it. I was wrong, and I've regretted it every day." I let out a bitter laugh. "Regret? You had 20 years to fix this. And now, you come here asking for forgiveness because you've heard about my success? How do you think that makes me feel?" The room fell silent. I could feel the weight of my words hanging in the air. My parents had been silent for a long time, but now they were the ones who seemed like they needed to explain themselves. My mother looked at me, her voice trembling. "I know we can't undo the past," she said quietly, "but we want to try and make things right. Please, give us a chance." I shook my head, feeling a mixture of rage and sadness. "A chance? Do you know how long I've been waiting for you to realize your mistakes? You left me to rot, while you protected your precious son-in-law. You don't get to waltz back into my life now, just because I'm successful." I stood up, walking toward the door. "If you want to be a part of my life, you'll have to earn it. But right now, you've got a lot of work to do to prove you deserve that chance." As I walked out of the room, I heard my mother's voice calling after me, but I didn't stop. It wasn't about proving anything to them anymore. It was about proving to myself that I didn't need them to validate who I had become. I had built this life on my own, and if they couldn't understand that, then I didn't need them. Weeks passed, and the tension lingered. My parents continued to send messages calling me and trying to convince me that they had changed, but their words didn't match their actions. Each time I spoke to them, the wounds reopened, and I realized I couldn't just forgive them overnight. They had been absent when I needed them most, and no amount of apologies could erase the years of pain they had caused me. But there was one thing they hadn't accounted for: my daughter, Lily. After that difficult conversation, I found myself reflecting on my relationship with her. My parents had played a part in keeping us apart, and though I had every reason to be angry with them, I couldn't bring myself to punish my daughter for their mistakes. It wasn't her fault, so I did what I could to build a relationship with her, one that had been denied for so long. I reached out to Lily again. It had been weeks since that first encounter, and I needed to know where we stood. Her response was more than I had hoped for. She was hesitant, but the door wasn't closed. She had a lot to process, but she wanted to meet again. I arranged to meet her at a quiet cafe, just the two of us. When I saw her for the first time, the years of estrangement didn't seem so important. She looked so much like Amy, yet so different. Her eyes held a mixture of curiosity and caution, but beneath it all, I could see the desire to know the truth. We spent hours talking, and though it was difficult for both of us, the conversation flowed more easily than I expected. I shared my side of the story, telling her about the betrayal I had suffered and the pain of being cast aside by those I had once trusted. Lily listened intently, her face softening as she began to understand the depth of my hurt. She told me about the confusion and anger she had felt growing up, not knowing who she really was, feeling torn between Carl, who had raised her, and me, the father who had been kept from her. As we spoke, I could see the cracks in the walls she had built up around herself. She was starting to process the betrayal she had been unknowingly caught up in. She made the brave decision to distance herself from Carl and Amy, at least for now. She needed time to heal, just like I did. Over the following months, our relationship slowly began to take shape. It wasn't easy. There were awkward moments, hard conversations, and misunderstandings, but with time, we forged a bond that I had thought was lost forever. Lily was still my daughter, no matter how many years had passed, and I was her father, despite everything that had happened. Meanwhile, my parents continued to beg for forgiveness, but I wasn't ready to welcome them back into my life completely. I kept them at arm's length, unsure if I could ever truly trust them again. I didn't need their validation to be who I was, but I couldn't just erase the scars of the past. As I focused on rebuilding my relationship with Lily, I found peace in knowing that I had made the right choice. I had fought to create something good out of the wreckage my family had left behind. And while my family's betrayal would never be forgotten, the future I had with Lily was worth everything. My success wasn't just about money, business, or fame. It was about healing, about reclaiming the life that had been stolen from me. And as I looked at Lily, I knew I had done the right thing, no matter how hard the road had been. I wasn't just rebuilding my family, I was rebuilding myself.